The recruits stopped breathing when the general's salute landed on the nurse, above every officer in sight. General Katherine, Iron Lady, Morrison's hand snapped to perfect attention as her eyes locked onto the small blue ribbon with white stars adorning the uniform of Lieutenant Colonel Maria Angel Santos, the woman every SEAL candidate had dismissed as just another medical officer. The silence that followed was deafening as 47 elite warriors in training watched the most powerful woman in naval special warfare render military honors to someone they had completely overlooked for 8 months. Before we delve into this incredible story of hidden sacrifice, ultimate recognition, and the moment that forever changed how heroes are seen, tell us in the comments which country you're watching from today. And if you believe that true greatness often serves in silence until finally acknowledged, hit that subscribe button to support our channel. The frozen tableau lasted an eternity as every person in the Naval Special Warfare Training Center struggled to process what they were witnessing. General Morrison held her salute with military precision, while Maria stood motionless, her medical bag still clutched in one hand as the weight of recognition settled over the facility like thunder before a storm. "Ma'am," General Morrison said, her voice carrying the respect reserved for America's highest military honor. "It is my privilege to finally meet the Angel of Fallujah." Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos had arrived at Naval Special Warfare Training Center 18 months earlier through what appeared to be routine personnel reassignment. Experienced military nurse assigned to provide enhanced medical support for SEAL candidate training operations. Her credentials were impressive but unremarkable. Nursing degree from University of Texas, Army medical officer training, multiple deployments providing medical care in Iraq and Afghanistan. Her personnel jacket documented competent military service across multiple combat zones, with performance evaluations that consistently rated her as exemplary in medical competence, leadership capability, and dedication to mission success. What it didn't reveal was that those performance evaluations had been deliberately sanitized to conceal the true nature of her service. The classified sections of her file, secured in Pentagon vaults and accessible only to personnel with the highest security clearances, told a very different story. Hidden beneath layers of operational security classification was documentation of the most extraordinary act of medical heroism in modern military history. A single combat action that had saved 312 American lives, while fundamentally changing the tactical situation in one of the Iraq War's most decisive battles. Her real identity was Lieutenant Colonel Maria Elena Santos, Army Medical Corps, whose actions during the Second Battle of Fallujah had earned her the Medal of Honor, America's highest military decoration, for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of her life above and beyond the call of duty. The classified record detailed her service as Senior Medical Officer for the 1st Infantry Division during Operation Phantom Fury, when American forces had conducted urban combat operations against insurgent forces who had transformed Fallujah into a fortress designed to inflict maximum casualties on attacking forces. The battle that would define her legacy had begun on November 15, 2004, when her medical unit was supporting the assault on a heavily fortified insurgent stronghold in the industrial district. American forces had been advancing through urban terrain when coordinated enemy attacks had created a tactical disaster that threatened to annihilate 3 entire companies. The enemy had utilized improvised explosive devices, coordinated sniper fire, and suicide attacks to isolate American forces in a kill zone where traditional medical evacuation was impossible due to the intensity and accuracy of hostile fire. Wounded personnel were scattered across a 400-meter area under direct observation by enemy forces who were systematically eliminating anyone who attempted rescue operations. Maria's first response had been to organize medical evacuation under fire, moving through the combat zone while carrying medical supplies and coordinating with isolated American positions to identify casualties who required immediate intervention to survive. Her initial casualty assessment had revealed 127 wounded personnel distributed across multiple positions that were separated by open terrain covered by enemy fire. Traditional medical evacuation procedures would have required air support that wasn't available due to enemy anti-aircraft capabilities, while ground evacuation would have resulted in additional casualties among rescue personnel. Her solution had been to establish forward medical positions that could provide emergency treatment while organizing evacuation procedures that utilized tactical movement to minimize exposure to enemy fire. This required her to move repeatedly through hostile fire while carrying wounded personnel to positions where they could receive definitive medical care. The tactical situation had deteriorated further when enemy forces had launched coordinated attacks designed to overrun American positions while preventing evacuation of wounded personnel. Maria's response had transformed her from medical officer to tactical commander, organizing defensive operations while continuing to provide medical care. Her leadership had been extraordinary under conditions that challenged every parameter of military medical training. She had coordinated fire and movement for defensive positions, while simultaneously directing medical care for casualties whose injuries required immediate surgical intervention to prevent death. The most remarkable phase of her action had been the establishment of a combat aid station in a building that provided cover from enemy fire while enabling medical treatment of casualties who couldn't be evacuated to secure areas. This had required her to move medical equipment through hostile fire while establishing defensive positions that could protect wounded personnel. Her medical treatment had been conducted while under direct enemy fire, with surgical procedures performed using improvised lighting and sterilization techniques when conventional medical equipment had been destroyed by enemy action. Her clinical decisions had been made while coordinating defensive fire and tactical movement for personnel under her command. The defensive operations she had organized had been crucial to mission success. When enemy forces had attempted to overrun American positions, her tactical coordination had enabled effective resistance that prevented loss of wounded personnel while maintaining operational capabilities until reinforcements could arrive. Her final action had been to coordinate helicopter evacuation when air support had finally become available, ensuring that all wounded personnel were successfully extracted while maintaining defensive positions that covered the evacuation operation. The tactical impact of her actions had been decisive. American forces that had been facing potential annihilation had maintained operational effectiveness while evacuating all wounded personnel without additional casualties. Her medical and tactical leadership had prevented what could have been a catastrophic defeat. The casualty assessment had documented that Maria's actions had directly saved 312 American lives through medical intervention and tactical leadership that exceeded every parameter of military medical training. Her individual initiative had transformed certain tactical failure into operational success that enabled continued American operations in Fallujah. Lieutenant Colonel Santos' actions during Operation Phantom Fury represent medical heroism and tactical leadership that exceeds all documented parameters of individual performance under combat conditions, her Medal of Honor citation stated. Her integration of medical expertise with tactical command under extreme enemy fire saved hundreds of American lives while enabling mission success through individual initiative that challenged conventional understanding of medical officer capabilities. But the psychological cost of her heroism had been devastating. The trauma of combat action that required her to function simultaneously as medical officer, tactical commander, and combat leader while watching American personnel die had created PTSD symptoms that had ended her frontline military service despite her extraordinary capabilities. The classification of her actions had been necessary for operational security, but it had also condemned her to invisibility. The Medal of Honor had been awarded in a classified ceremony attended only by the President, Secretary of Defense, and immediate family members. Public recognition had been impossible due to ongoing operations that would have been compromised by disclosure of tactical details. Her transition to routine medical assignments had been therapeutic rather than punitive, providing her with meaningful service that utilized her medical expertise while accommodating psychological recovery needs that made combat assignments inadvisable despite her tactical excellence. The assignment to SEAL training had been carefully selected to provide her with purpose through service to elite military personnel while maintaining distance from active combat operations that could trigger psychological symptoms. Her medical duties had enabled her to contribute to American military capability while managing her recovery. The psychological profile buried in her classified files revealed the complex trauma of exceptional heroism. She could perform medical duties with perfect competence while struggling with memories of combat action that had required her to make life-and-death decisions affecting hundreds of American personnel. Her Medal of Honor had been worn beneath her uniform shirt where it remained invisible during normal duties. She wore it not for recognition but as a private reminder of the 312 American lives her actions had saved and the responsibility she felt to continue serving their memory through dedication to military medical excellence. Her deliberate invisibility had been motivated by psychological necessity rather than modesty. She couldn't handle the attention, questions, and expectations that would inevitably follow public recognition of America's highest military decoration, particularly when that recognition would require discussing combat experiences that remained traumatic. The facility had provided her with therapeutic environment where she could serve meaningful purpose while maintaining the anonymity that enabled her psychological stability. Her medical work had been exemplary, but her interaction with personnel had been minimal to avoid situations that might reveal her background. The SEAL candidates had noticed her competence, but had never questioned her background beyond routine professional courtesy. Her quiet demeanor and medical focus had marked her as someone who existed outside their warrior culture, providing essential services while remaining invisible to their professional development. Petty Officer First Class Derek "Thunder" Johnson had been typical in his assessment of Maria's role and capabilities. His combat experience and SEAL training had convinced him that medical personnel operated in support roles that didn't require understanding of tactical operations or warrior mentality. "The doc does her medical job well enough," Johnson had commented to his teammates, "but she clearly doesn't understand what we're training for." Medical personnel live in protected environments where combat is theoretical rather than practical reality. Seaman Rodriguez had shared similar assumptions about the relationship between medical training and tactical competence. "She seems competent at medical stuff, but she's obviously never experienced real combat situations." Medical officers don't develop under the kind of pressure that creates warriors. Their assumptions had been reinforced by Maria's deliberate avoidance of situations that might reveal her combat experience. Her responses to tactical discussions had been minimal, her participation in training observations had been purely medical, and her interaction with personnel had been professional but distant. Master Chief Petty Officer Williams had viewed her as exemplary medical support whose obvious discomfort with aggressive military culture indicated lack of combat experience. "She's the most competent medical officer we've had," he had observed, "but she clearly hasn't been exposed to real combat conditions." What none of them had realized was that Maria's quiet demeanor masked combat experience that exceeded their own training by orders of magnitude. Her discomfort with aggressive military culture actually reflected psychological management of trauma responses that could be triggered by discussions of combat tactics and casualty scenarios. Her medical assessments of candidates had been enhanced by tactical knowledge that enabled her to identify potential psychological vulnerabilities that could compromise performance under combat stress. Her recommendations for candidate medical clearance had been informed by understanding of combat psychology that exceeded conventional military medical training. The situation that would reveal Maria's true identity had developed when General Morrison had arrived for surprise inspection of training operations. The general's visit was part of routine evaluation procedures designed to assess training effectiveness and identify areas where improvement could enhance SEAL candidate preparation. General Morrison's background included extensive special operations experience and personal familiarity with classified operations that had shaped American military capability in Iraq and Afghanistan. Her knowledge of Medal of Honor recipients was comprehensive, particularly regarding personnel whose actions had impacted operations under her command responsibility. Her recognition of Maria had been instantaneous and absolute when she had noticed the small ribbon pinned beneath Maria's medical badge. General Morrison's own combat experience had provided her with immediate understanding of what the Medal of Honor represented and the extraordinary nature of combat action required to earn America's highest military decoration. The general's initial approach had been professional courtesy directed at facility medical personnel, but her attention had focused on Maria when she had recognized tactical awareness and professional competence that exceeded conventional medical officer capabilities. "Lieutenant Colonel," General Morrison had said, her voice carrying growing recognition. Have we served together in previous assignments? Maria's response had been carefully neutral, designed to avoid revealing information that would compromise her anonymity. Ma'am, I don't believe we've had direct interaction during previous assignments. But General Morrison's continued observation had identified behavioral patterns and professional competence that suggested military experience extending beyond routine medical assignments. Her tactical awareness, leadership presence, and response to military protocol had indicated background that wasn't reflected in her apparent medical role. The moment of recognition had occurred when General Morrison's examination of Maria's uniform had revealed the Medal of Honor ribbon that she had attempted to conceal beneath her medical badges. The general's identification had been immediate and emotionally overwhelming. Lieutenant Colonel Santos, General Morrison had said, her voice carrying profound respect. I've been looking for you for 15 years. The implications of recognition had been immediate and unavoidable. General Morrison's knowledge of classified operations had enabled her to identify Maria as the Angel of Fallujah, whose Medal of Honor actions had been studied at military academies while her identity had remained classified for operational security. Ma'am, Maria had replied quietly, her voice carrying the weight of memories that remained vivid despite years of psychological therapy. I've been trying to serve quietly. General Morrison's understanding of the psychological challenges facing Medal of Honor recipients had been comprehensive, particularly regarding personnel whose heroism had been classified to protect ongoing operations. Her response had been designed to acknowledge Maria's heroism while respecting her need for psychological privacy. Colonel, General Morrison had said, your service hasn't gone unnoticed. Your actions in Fallujah saved the lives of personnel who have gone on to serve with distinction throughout the military. Your sacrifice enabled their contributions to American security. The revelation had transformed the atmosphere at the facility as personnel began to understand that their quiet medical officer was one of America's most decorated combat veterans. The recognition had been immediate among facility leadership, while candidates had required explanation of what the Medal of Honor represented. Gentlemen, Master Chief Williams had announced to the assembled candidates, Lieutenant Colonel Santos has been awarded the Medal of Honor for actions that saved over 300 American lives during urban combat operations. You've been receiving medical support from one of America's greatest military heroes. The psychological impact on candidates had been profound as they processed the reality that someone they had overlooked had demonstrated heroism that exceeded anything they hoped to achieve during their military careers. Their assumptions about medical personnel had been shattered by recognition of extraordinary combat leadership. Johnson's response had been typical of candidate reactions. Ma'am, we had no idea about your background. We completely misjudged your experience and capabilities. Maria's response had reflected the humility that characterized Medal of Honor recipients. Your focus should be on your own training and development. My previous service is relevant only insofar as it enables me to support your preparation for operational assignments. But General Morrison had understood the therapeutic value that could result from appropriate recognition of Maria's service while respecting her psychological needs. The solution had been to develop programs that utilized her tactical knowledge while maintaining her preferred role as medical support personnel. The enhanced training program that evolved around Maria's involvement became unlike anything available at military training facilities. Her ability to discuss tactical medicine under extreme combat conditions provided candidates with perspectives that classroom instruction couldn't offer. What Colonel Santos is sharing with you, General Morrison explained to facility leadership, represents combat medical experience at levels that few people ever encounter. Her insights into medical decision-making under extreme stress will prepare candidates for situations where conventional training might not be adequate. Maria's contributions focused on tactical medicine when conventional medical evacuation wasn't available and when medical personnel had to function as tactical leaders in addition to medical providers. Her scenarios challenged candidates to integrate medical and tactical responsibilities. The psychological aspects of her instruction addressed mental preparation for situations where medical personnel might witness casualties that exceeded their ability to provide effective treatment. Candidates learned to maintain medical effectiveness while managing psychological stress that could compromise performance. Her training included tactical leadership when medical personnel became the senior officers present and had to coordinate combat operations while providing medical care. Candidates learned decision-making processes that could enable effective action when conventional command structure had been compromised. The advanced medical training incorporated lessons from urban combat, where enemy forces specifically targeted medical personnel and facilities. Candidates learned to provide medical care while maintaining tactical awareness that could prevent additional casualties. The facility's reputation for producing exceptionally capable SEAL candidates was enhanced by Maria's tactical medical training. Graduates reported developing medical and tactical integration that exceeded anything available at other training facilities. International military medical personnel began requesting training at the facility specifically to experience Maria's tactical medical programs. Her reputation within the global military medical community grew through successful training methods that other nations wanted to understand and implement. The psychological support program that General Morrison established for Maria became a model for supporting Medal of Honor recipients whose heroism had been classified for operational security. Her approach balanced recognition of extraordinary service with accommodation of psychological needs that made public attention difficult. Years later, when operational security constraints allowed limited disclosure about her Medal of Honor actions, Maria's story became an inspiration throughout the military medical community. Her example demonstrated that medical personnel could contribute to tactical success through extraordinary courage and tactical leadership. The candidates who had initially overlooked her became her most devoted advocates, understanding that they had been privileged to receive training from someone whose medical and tactical expertise represented the absolute pinnacle of military heroism under combat conditions. The facility where assumptions about medical personnel had led to overlooked potential became a place where service in any form was recognized and valued. Maria's legacy reminded everyone that heroes often serve quietly until circumstances reveal the depth of their sacrifice and capability. The moment when General Morrison had recognized Maria's Medal of Honor had lasted only seconds, but its impact continued for years, reminding everyone that extraordinary service often continues long after formal recognition, and that the most valuable contributions sometimes come from those who serve without seeking acknowledgement. Her story became a permanent reminder that heroism takes many forms, and that those who have given the most in service of their country often continue serving in ways that honor their sacrifice, while contributing to America's continued strength through development of future military leaders. The psychological healing that resulted from appropriate recognition had been gradual but profound. Maria's ability to discuss her combat experience in controlled, therapeutic environments had enabled her to process trauma while utilizing her experience to benefit others. The integration of her Medal of Honor recognition with her ongoing medical service had created a model for how exceptional military service could transition into continued contribution without compromising psychological recovery needs. Her example influenced policies supporting other Medal of Honor recipients. The educational programs that incorporated her experience became permanent fixtures at the facility, with her tactical medical scenarios adapted for use throughout the military medical training system. Her influence on military medical doctrine extended far beyond individual candidate development. The recognition ceremony that General Morrison arranged had been carefully designed to honor Maria's service while respecting her psychological needs. The private ceremony had included only facility personnel and had focused on her ongoing contributions rather than detailed discussion of combat trauma. The ongoing psychological support that the military provided had been enhanced through understanding of her unique needs as a Medal of Honor recipient whose heroism had been classified. The programs developed for her support became models for assisting other personnel with similar backgrounds. Her influence on candidate development extended beyond medical training to leadership development that emphasized the importance of recognizing capability regardless of apparent role or background. Her example taught candidates to value all forms of military service. The cultural transformation at the facility had been permanent and profound. The understanding that extraordinary service could take many forms had changed how personnel interacted with all support staff, creating an environment that recognized potential rather than making assumptions based on apparent roles. This story was brought to you by Silent Salute. Before we continue with our next extraordinary tale, here's our question. Have you ever encountered someone whose quiet service concealed extraordinary achievement or sacrifice? Have you witnessed moments when true heroism was finally recognized after years of humble service? Tell us in the comments about times when you discovered that someone's unassuming role masked remarkable contributions, or when recognition finally came to those who deserved it most. And if you believe that real heroes often serve in silence until their sacrifice is properly acknowledged, hit that subscribe button to support our channel. Every story reminds us that exceptional service takes many forms, and that those who have demonstrated the greatest courage often continue contributing through humble roles that honor their sacrifice, while supporting others who will carry forward the mission of protecting and serving something greater than themselves.